Welcome to our webinar today on moving to the cloud. My name is Michael Sugrue. I'm the president of Pace Technical, joined today by Shail Risman, our CEO. Say hi, Shail.
Greetings, everybody.
And we also have Noman Ahmed, our director of technology. And we'll bring Noman back out again once we get to the Q&A section, just in case there's any other questions. So Shail, we're talking about cloud today, and I think we've seen a real resurgence of interest in the cloud based on kind of the current environment that we're in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was inevitable. I know that when you and I started doing this, close to 20 years ago, cloud was virtually non-existent, and people were very, very skeptical about it, even as we kept moving forward with it. But now that people, we had this obviously emergency situation, those people who were in the cloud, or at least had some presence in the cloud, really had the advantage when it came to moving at home, for sure.
So obviously years ago, there was a big surge. Lots of people moved to the cloud, and it's sort of trickled, I guess, over the last several years. But now we're just getting lots more increased clients and prospects alike. So what we wanted to do today is kind of give people some information and things to consider if you're in the same boat now, maybe thinking about a move to the cloud, or maybe you're partially in the cloud, want to figure out how to get all the way there, or maybe you have zero there and want to figure out how to get started. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some ideas there today. So just real quick, first a little bit about us. Shail and I are the founders of Pace. We've been in business now a little over 20 years. We provide proactive managed IT support, managed cybersecurity, cloud services. We're an ISO 9001 company, and for the last 5 years have been a great place to work. So if you see the graphic here to the left, I think most people on the call are probably familiar with Pace, but if you're not, people generally work with us because of the proactive element of our services. I mean, we still do all the reactive things that kind of any IT company will do for you, monitoring tools, managing security, backups, managing cloud, help desk support with ticketing systems and emergency support, and then project services like doing network upgrades, server installs, office moves, cloud migrations, all those things. But really where I think we're a bit different in why people work with us, these proactive elements. So the technology alignment, we have a dedicated role in our company where we have engineers that are proactively managing and checking on the security and aligning our clients to a very specific set of standards, best practices, just get better results. But it's the dedicated process and the dedicated individual that to carry out those things that kind of sets us apart. The technology consulting, we assign everyone what we call a business strategist, client strategist, that's there to help with like the planning, the vision, changes, the structure, the technology, planning for 3 to 5 years out, etc. And then lastly, our client success team, which really ties everything together. They're really the KPI officers that are making sure that we are delivering the service as expected and our clients are getting the results as expected. They're managing like response times, checking issues, making sure that we're responding in a certain amount of time, etc. But overall, that the client is seeing success through technology. Sound about right, Shail?
Exactly right. I didn't want to interrupt you.
That's okay.
We're getting, like this is, like you said, proactivity is our as they would say, our superpower, and it's what is most important for our offering. Absolutely.
So I'm just going to shut off my video now just to make sure it doesn't get in the way of any slides. Maybe Shail, you'll do the same. So if you've been to any of our other recent webinars, here's some of the ones we've done over the last several weeks. Just did one on IT emergency preparedness, kind of like disaster planning, business continuity, working remotely, keeping your culture alive. We did one on cybersecurity threats. This is more like end user cybersecurity training on phishing, email security, those kind of things. And then we also did one on Microsoft Teams as well as working remotely. All these are available on our website. If you go to pacetechnical.com, under the media drop-down menu, you'll find access to all of these. So feel free to use these for yourself, share with other colleagues or anybody else that you think might be interested and need help with any of these topics. So here's the agenda that we're going to cover today. Some reasons why to move to the cloud, different cloud models that exist, preparing for a migration, and then what a migration process might look like. And then we have a small live demo that I was going to do based on our cloud and a couple of other things. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. So let's start off with some reasons why we would move to the cloud. First obvious one is continuity and disaster recovery. Obviously very prevalent right now, everybody's thinking about it, but certainly a move to the cloud, definitely in one fell swoop, certainly does put at least a majority of the disaster recovery piece in place when it comes to IT. So generally with cloud services, you mostly can access anywhere and on any device. And I put any device in parentheses with a question mark. Not all software can you access on every device or all systems. And one thing I will say about cloud services is not every cloud service is the same. I don't know if some people have that perception, is that once you go to the cloud, everybody just kind of does it the same exact way, and it doesn't matter where you go, it's all the same. That couldn't be further from the truth. Everything is very dependent on whoever the provider is, how much they invest in their infrastructure, how they set up their infrastructure, how they maintain their infrastructure, how they provide support, how they secure the infrastructure, etc. So one of the variables as well will be how you access those cloud systems. So on a lot of them, and I will say a majority of them, you should be able to access cloud services anywhere and on any device. May not be the nicest way to access things like on your mobile phone. However, the possibility is there in a pinch if you need to. Redundancies, and again, I'll say kind of most again, not all are created equal, but generally with cloud services, providers do have redundancies in hardware so that hardware failures aren't slowing or causing interruptions. Power redundancies, generally cloud services are delivered through data centers, which the majority of which are providing redundancies in power. So multiple connections of power coming in to their infrastructure, as well as multiple providers of power, as well as backup and failover power. Internet redundancies, climate and cooling also that you get within a data center, and then backup and replication. Again, that is also going to vary based on the provider. So all questions that you want to ask, and we have a section in that going to remind you to ask questions like these of any provider you're going to work with. User experience is another great reason moving to the cloud. So you do end up with a similar user experience for users when you go to a cloud instance, because everything is delivered from one central location, as opposed to installing software on each individual computer, and maybe some of them are up to date and received a recent update and some haven't. When you deliver everything centrally through a cloud, generally with one fell swoop, you're updating software and systems for everyone at the same time. So everybody is going to get access to all the updates immediately. So in that way, you're controlling both the experience and what all the users see, as well as controlling, the amount of the issues that could come into play versus, somebody doesn't have all the patches, etc. Those kind of, variables kind of go out the window. Also, user experience, if you have many remote people, if you have lots of remote offices or remote workers, you get a little bit more of the dependability of access, especially when it's at a data center versus accessing from an office where maybe the internet connection isn't as good, you don't have as good a failover power and things like that. So the dependability of people accessing from pretty much anywhere should be consistent. I mean, the only variable there will be what machine they're accessing on and what their internet connectivity is at whatever remote or location that they are residing at. Some other reasons moving at once. So generally hardware upgrades are typically managed by a cloud provider. So typically in on-premise server environment, you're replacing equipment, anywhere between say every 4 to 6 years, something like that. Where generally when you're in a cloud, the provider is upgrading hardware because they have redundancies. They can upgrade hardware without affecting generally your experience. So you're not going through that process. You're not going out and buying new hardware, etc. All that's managed by the provider. So I say move at once because let's say you move your email to Office 365. In theory, you should never ever have to move your email again. Operational versus capital expense is a big one versus setting out tons of money on purchasing servers and equipment every 4 to 6 years or whatnot. Everything just moves into an operational expense. Now, I will say that moving systems to the cloud doesn't necessarily, in some cases you can save some money. And I guess when you look at an overall picture, yes, the cost is lower running things in the cloud. But if you're just going to go out and compare the cost of buying servers and software versus what your cloud cost is going to be, you're not always going to be cheaper with a cloud instance. And I would say in a lot of cases, the cloud is going to be about the same or higher in cost. But when you look at everything, staff efficiencies, the backup, the business continuity, all those factors involved, energy consumption, etc., you're probably going to come out ahead in a cloud. Now, capital expense, certainly some people might argue that you can get by leasing equipment, and that's one way around it if you do need to keep or you do want to keep an infrastructure internally. That is one way around to turn that capital expense into more of an operational expense. And then lastly, security, certainly keeping things in a data center. There's much better physical security. Most data centers, have guards on duty, typically 24/7. Everything is gated, either fingerprint or retinal analysis to gain entry, man traps. Only a certain amount of people are allowed in. You need identification, you need security clearance to get in, etc. So obviously the security, physical security is definitely there. Data and access security is a completely other thing. And again, that is going to vary by provider. So how you access your data as well as how that data is secured within that cloud infrastructure as well is going to vary. So this is, these are all questions that you want to ask and just be sure of. So some of the typical scenarios that we see that triggers moves to the cloud, you want better continuity and disaster recovery. That's an obvious one. Current hardware being end of life. This is a big one. So, when you hit that fork in the road where your servers are 5, 6, sometimes more than 6 years old, and you're looking at either capital costs of replacing that hardware or potentially looking at the cloud. So that's an obvious time to at least consider it and go through the motions of what would it look like for your people, what are the costs and process involved, etc. Also, if you're a growing business, maybe you're adding or already have a bunch of remote offices, but maybe you're growing in people and maybe your reliance on the remote people accessing systems in your infrastructure is growing. It's a good reason to move things into a data center or into a cloud environment. Or if you just in general have many remote users, whether you have many remote offices or not, if that reliance on remote access is growing, that's a big one. One more move scenario that I don't have on here is a move, a physical, like you're moving office. I will say having to move server infrastructure from one location to another versus moving an office who's already in a cloud at a data center, it's completely different. Like the move is so much easier when you already have systems in the cloud. So that's one other area where people start when they're planning, hopefully they do plan well in advance. If you're that 6 months to a year out, you could potentially do that move to the cloud just prior to, so that you're, and not having to move all that equipment with you as well. But there's also some challenging environments and maybe some, reasons that might hinder people from moving to the cloud. First one is, any kind of environment dealing with multimedia. So design firms maybe that are working on like lots of high-res images, maybe high-res video, things that are just really large file sizes, or working on software that just doesn't lend itself to working very well over the internet. So, that's a challenging one. Engineering is another, architectural software, CAD software. I know they're working on solutions for that right now. It's really highly dependent. You need a lot of processing power on the back end of that cloud infrastructure. And you need fantastic internet connectivity, but that's definitely a challenging one where in a lot of cases, even if companies do go cloud, some of these services are things that are kept local, but we just figure out other ways to back up and provide the disaster recovery and business continuity to those things in another way. But definitely challenging environments, and if that is a large part of your business, definitely a consideration here. Manufacturing companies, especially where you have software controlling manufacturing equipment. Also in manufacturing, all depending on equipment, some of it has to run on very old software and equipment we still see out in the field. Machines that will only run, or software that will only run on like Windows XP. I've seen some that only run, even versions older than that. But XP and Windows 7 pretty prevalent, even though they're outdated operating systems. Also add some challenges when trying to run those things in the cloud. But just manufacturing in general, where you have equipment on premise and whatnot, again, also challenging to have if you're trying to run software in the cloud that has to control equipment back on premise. Custom software applications. So there's some software out there that just plain old doesn't perform well in the cloud, and there may not be much way to work around that. Other software that's not supported. We don't see this as much anymore, but 10, 15 years ago, it was pretty commonplace to see software providers as people started moving to the cloud, and software providers weren't ready for that, and their software didn't perform well, started to cause problems, and more so caused a lot of support requests by end users. So software companies at that time started putting out messages and notes in their software that their software wasn't going to be supported in a remote environment, just because they were getting so many support requests. We don't see that as much anymore, but it is a good thing definitely to test, because you don't want to obviously move everything out and find out that a move is actually going to slow your people down. Internet connectivity is another one. Certainly, we still see pockets here, even in the GTA, that there are pockets where good internet connectivity just isn't very prevalent. Even just in the last couple of months, I've came across a couple of companies out kind of just outside of the city in the Vaughan area, and still couldn't get good fiber internet. So that's just a case of Bell not upgrading their connectivity in certain locations. And maybe not as much of a population, or they just don't have enough people there to reap the benefits of making the investment in their infrastructure. So again, the last thing you want to do is slow people down further by making a move. So some of the cloud models that exist, probably the most prevalent one or most popular one, infrastructure as a service. So this is basically where your complete infrastructure is hosted. Some people also will refer to this as desktop as a service or VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure. So typically, so all of your servers, all of your data, all of your files or whatnot, you will have nothing that is resident on premise at your office. Everything will be generally at a data center in a cloud infrastructure, and you'll access your systems usually over some sort of remote protocol, either a remote desktop, the Windows remote desktop, RDP, or Citrix, another popular one. There's more than this, but these are probably the couple of most popular ones. And I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later when we get to the demo. The other way to access is through published applications. So with published applications, it's somewhat similar, only we're just going to publish applications so that users are going to use their laptop or their computer or whatnot, log in how they normally would, and they're going to have a local instance. When they're using their browser is just going to be using their local internet, and they can still run applications locally on their device. But we're going to then deliver some published applications. So they'll maybe have an icon on their desktop, and once they double click on that icon and open up that one application, it is going to be delivered cloud-based. So it's there's a couple of ways to do it. You're still kind of accomplishing the same thing, all depending on the environment. We will do it one way or another. The last thing is I was going to mention, you can also accomplish infrastructure as a service by using what's called a co-locate. If you're not familiar with a co-locate, that's basically taking your server equipment and locating it at a data center. So you still own your own hardware and software. Generally, we're just going to either put it yourself and lease space yourself, or what's more common, using a company like us to utilize the rack space that we already have in a data center, locate your hardware there. You can still access it, assuming you have the licensing for remote desktop or Citrix or whatnot. It just, with some people and some businesses, it gives them a little bit more control. If they ever wanted to move, let's say they don't like the provider or the data center anymore, and they just want to pick up and move somewhere else, it's maybe a little bit more private. They're the only ones that have access to the hardware. Maybe they have a compliance reason to be the only ones, and they don't want to be on any kind of a shared hardware environment, which is typical with clouds. Even though it's separated instances of servers and things like that, it is still on a shared infrastructure ultimately. So just another way for people to feel a little bit more secure and have things a little bit more separate, but still kind of accomplishing the same thing. Hybrid is kind of a combination of the two. So I think in our poll, we've seen that probably most people are in some sort of a hybrid environment. I think a lot of businesses, certainly most of our clients, have moved at least their email service offsite and onto a cloud service such as Office 365. So a hybrid is really just that. It's a combination of hosted and on-site. It could also be a combination of hosted with one provider and maybe hosted with another. But a lot of reason people are going to a hybrid environment, again, applications that either don't perform well or unsupported remotely. So maybe you still need to keep some systems on site or on premise, but you're going to try and move maybe file sharing, maybe email, maybe you have some applications that are web-based that you're going to use as well. I like to say hybrid is a good way to make a transition to the cloud. If you have nothing in the cloud, making a start, and I think what we see with most people, they tend to start with email. It's one of the easiest things to move, and it is something that people are so highly reliant on from a disaster recovery standpoint. It's probably one of the best things to move first because email communication is critical with most businesses. So the last cloud model I'm going to throw out there is software as a service. And software as a service is basically just web-based and cloud-delivered applications. So Office 365 is a good example of that, how you can open up and run Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., all those applications web-based through Office 365. I will say most software providers are moving to this model. There probably still are some out there, but most software providers do want that recurring revenue model that you get with software as a service. So they want to be able to, bill people monthly for service, as opposed to just selling the software and getting, a one-time sale, and then maybe a small, whatever ongoing support fee that they might charge people. So this sort of evens out their billing, which is kind of really the advantage that the software providers are looking for. Also cuts down on software piracy, that they have a lot more control over their software in this model as well. So the typical cloud providers, and certainly this isn't going to cover everything, but just trying to show the most common. Public and private cloud providers as examples, Microsoft is one with its Azure, Amazon, Google would be another. So they're providing both public cloud services, Google Apps and things like that, as well as private services. So through Azure and Amazon, you can get private whole cloud instances, private cloud, virtual cloud servers, etc. The second thing, and probably pretty prevalent, is IT companies such as Pace Technical providing cloud services for clients. So here's one where things really vary quite a bit. Obviously, companies are going to vary in size, in structure, in the infrastructure that they have in place, how much they invest in that infrastructure, how it's been set up, how it's been secured, etc. So this is where things can really vary, and you're just going to want to do your homework on a company before getting started with somebody there. But generally, IT companies have the ability to provide any kind of cloud services, certainly Office 365, virtual servers, whole virtual hosted infrastructures. Sometimes they build it themselves, like we have at Pace, or sometimes they'll use third-party services, which is the next one, which kind of dovetails between IT companies. Lots of IT companies, from the smallest to largest. There's a whole bunch. I get probably several emails a day from these third-party cloud providers looking for me to sign up and get all my clients hosted on their cloud infrastructure. So look, for real small IT companies that don't want to invest in the infrastructure, yeah, that could be a good way to go. You just lose a lot of control doing it that way. We tried it that way. It didn't work out very well, just based on the control factor. But there are several third-party cloud service providers you can go to, like Cloud Services is all they do. Lastly, SaaS provider, software as a service. Again, for applications, Office 365, Salesforce would be another example of this. The one important thing that I want to stress, doesn't matter what route you go, just really understanding the backup and disaster recovery. I guess I'll go one step further in understanding the security for each, because again, I will say not all cloud infrastructures and or providers are built the same. So when you're preparing for a move to the cloud, there's a few things that you may want to take a look at. First off, the obvious one, checking connectivity, both in your office and or office locations, as well as people's homes, remote locations, wherever people are going to be working. That's a real important one we've seen overlooked in the past. I'm sure during this current situation, people are probably feeling the pinch, especially people that are working in a remote location and having to access data during this time right now. And I'm sure people found out how good or not so great their connectivity is. Deleting and archiving data. So email, you may have a lot of emails. If you're an email hoarder, I'm an email hoarder. Files as well. A lot of cloud services are priced based on the amount of storage that you're using up. So, going through a process of archiving old data or just deleting old data is a good exercise to go through. Could save you some money as well. Researching software providers. So looking to see, based on the software that you run today, is there a SaaS solution that exists either with your provider? Is there potentially a competitor that may work for you that you could potentially move to that is cloud-based? Looking with your current provider, are remote and cloud use supported with your current software? Definitely something that you want to ask. As well as testing any applications that you have beforehand, just to make sure that it is going to work as expected, that there isn't going to be any gotchas accessing software remotely. User training is another thing that's good, besides just making that switch over to a cloud infrastructure and then notifying everybody the first day that they're accessing things a little bit differently now. It's best to do user training beforehand, show people what the environment's going to look like, even have them do some test drives with the cloud services, user guides, how-tos, having those available for people beforehand, definitely the way to go. If you're a company that's already in the cloud and using cloud services, we've seen lots of changes over the last certainly 10 to 15 years once cloud services have become prevalent. So you may be on some type of an infrastructure as a service solution right now, but you may be potentially even overpaying for cloud services because there's quite possibly more efficient ways to deliver services via the cloud now. So if you haven't had your services reviewed in a while, it's not a bad exercise to go through. So the general process, again, could be different all depending where you go, but this is a general process that most places are going to follow. Everything has to start with a review and audit before you make that migration. You could look at things and even get some, pricing and things like that based on a quick look and understanding of the business, but definitely you're going to want to do a review and audit, uncover all systems and software that your people use and make sure everything has been accounted for. Also reviewing and auditing and testing connectivity, again, at several locations. Next step would be the system design. What sort of cloud model are we going to use? And then the consideration comes in with equipment and how you're going to access. So are you going to just still work with desktops? Are you thinking about maybe having people use laptops for a consistent experience no matter where they're at? Dumb terminals or thin client machines, they can save a little bit of money. You actually don't save as much anymore with thin client machines as you would have at one time. But also another way, some companies like to use thin client machines because you really lock down the user, and it does limit the amount of things that people can use with their machine. Maybe makes things a little bit more secure in some ways. But there is also that balance with usability and what people can and cannot do on their machine. Again, it's just something that you have to evaluate and see what's going to be best for your business. What provider and or providers you're going to be using, where it's going to be located, what sort of security you're going to have. Are you going to be utilizing things like two-factor authentication for access, VPNs, etc.? Next part of the process, really developing the project plan. Like any cloud migration is going to be very similar to, doing a server upgrade. or an office move, those kind of things. Still need a project plan, just mapping everything out, how it's going to do, setting expectations, etc. Then comes setting up the infrastructure, testing the infrastructure, and once everything looks good and is working properly, you set a time to do a final data migration and a cutover from whatever the old infrastructure was to the new cloud infrastructure. Everything sounding about right there, Shale?
Absolutely, absolutely. I had a couple of notes, certainly, as far as some of the things that we have seen from prospective clients coming from a situation, like a bad situation, with the cloud, specifically, trying to move everything to a kind of public-facing cloud like Azure, or Google or something like that, and forgetting that they actually need maintenance and care for these servers the same way that that you may need it elsewhere, like for a hybrid situation. And also the internet connectivity is, I just want to reiterate that, is massive. We've had clients who have upgraded their entire cloud and then have not been able to get the performance they need and have come to us going, what can we do? When the situation should have been told to them right from the beginning, saying you need internet redundancy, you need at least 2 connections in, and you need it to be the highest grade that you possibly can get in your area, just to ensure your reliability. And those are the 2 biggest ones we've seen when people are coming over to us.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the support and maintenance, because that dovetails nicely into this next section here, which is questions to ask. Now, certainly you're not limited to just these questions, and you may have more yourself, but I just wanted to put up, some of the key ones that you should be asking for any vendor. Where is data stored? Obviously, some companies either just want their data stored within Canada, and some have compliance reasons to ensure that all data is stored within Canada. Again, once you start getting into third-party cloud providers, not all have infrastructures and data centers just within Canada. So it's an important question asked, certainly for some people. Not some people really may not care as much. What's the uptime guarantee? How is the environment secured? And then here we go, like, how are systems and users supported? Because I think certainly a lot of businesses that we've spoke to that did get into the cloud, went in, they had a great song and dance by a company showing, all the bells and whistles of their data center and the cloud and how great everything was going to be on the cloud, but really didn't have the notion in mind that cloud systems and infrastructures are in many ways almost exactly like an on-premise server infrastructure. Like, these systems are all using, our infrastructure uses, VMware and Windows Server, just like it would in our on-premise environments that we support. So they still do need regular maintenance, and this really goes to the kind of type of and caliber of the company that's providing the cloud service, is where you're going to see big differences in what the end experience is going to be for users. So starting out with large public companies, first off, like, with the Bells and Microsoft and Googles and whatnot, these huge companies, definitely you're getting less individual support. And as you can imagine, their focus is on making sure their services are up and running for the masses. Once you get down into one individual that's having a problem with their email or their Outlook, they're a little less apt to handling some of those situations versus making sure all systems are up and functioning. Then you get into the MSP, managed service provider, or IT service company, cloud provider, whatever you want to call it, a provider that's providing cloud services. Some questions that you're going to want to ask here, is what kind of company are they? Like, are they a well-structured company? especially if you're working with one at the moment and they're, pushing cloud services on you, you want to kind of think about that. Are they a generally well-run and well-structured company to begin with? Because I can guarantee you, if they're not, then most likely the cloud solution or experience is probably going to be on par with that. Also, proactive versus a reactive company. Like, are they the type of company that just, is waiting for you to call with issues or a request or something that's broken? Or are they more of that proactive company that wants to ensure things are up and running? They have great process and procedure for keeping things running, for managing standards, best practices, proactively managing security, etc. Are they delivering and sharing with you any kind of metrics, performance metrics, KPIs, and things like that? Again, if that's not the experience before the cloud, I guarantee you just moving to that with that provider to the cloud isn't going to change anything. So just really, really important to know who you're going to be working with and what the support is going to be, because that is 100% versus, what version of Windows Server their cloud uses is going to have way less of an impact than how users are supported and how systems are maintained.
Absolutely, Mike.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in for a second because, you're absolutely right. This couldn't be more important. You're handing your entire company's productivity and reliability to these people. So you got to be sure they're well in place. They've been around for a while. They've established themselves as an IT service provider, and frankly, not just delivering cloud, because there's a whole lot more to making this cloud situation work than just having a place to put your data and your programs. You need to have well-rounded maintenance that involves not only the cloud, but getting your office to speak to the cloud. So I think that comes back to experience, real life experience that we've had with people coming over to PACE.
That's right. Certainly from, we've seen it many times. We've had to move people out of other cloud environments. So it's one other thing that moving, it just adds another little variable involved. So just, you want to make sure you're with the right cloud provider to begin with, because it can be challenging at times to move from one cloud environment to the other. I don't know, some people might think it's easier in that respect, but all depending on what kind of platform and infrastructure that a company is running, how well it's structured and how well it's been maintained. Sometimes we have to just recreate everything from scratch again when moving somebody from one cloud to another. So just another important thing to keep in mind. So looking at pricing structures, just a few of the ways that cloud services are priced. A lot of them are priced, per user, sometimes per device, by the server, by the amount of storage, by the amount of, utilities that you're using, processing power, memory, things like that also can be variables that come into play. But you just want to understand what the pricing structure is beforehand and what are the variables. And then lastly, of course, asking for references, very important. Talking to other clients that are in that provider's cloud and what the experience has been like, not only with the performance of the cloud, but also with the company and support and whatnot after the fact. So that's generally the things that I wanted to show, with the exception of doing a quick demo for you. So just wanted to show you two things. One is going to be just a quick look at our PACE cloud, and more importantly, the user and admin portal that goes with our cloud service, as well as a lot of people ask me questions about how to utilize Office 365 for file storage and managing files, and how does that look like for an end user? How can you make it a little bit more seamless with end users? So just going to jump out of this and down here into my remote. So this is just a test environment here, but this is what a remote desktop instant looks like for us. This is using the remote desktop protocol. So as you can see, it looks just like a normal desktop. Of course, you can customize the background. Different applications that we have installed. I mean, start menu just like you would on any PC or laptop, list of your programs that you can access, etc. So not much really different there, but one of the things that I did want to show, certainly with our cloud portal, is the user portal and admin portal that we provide for our clients. So just going to do a quick run through of that. So the first, this is just the home screen where a user can come. Every user has access to this. Administrators have access to different areas in here as well. Even our on-premise clients have access to this support portal as well, but it is all cloud-based. So from the home screen, people can report an issue, request to add or modify users, etc. There's a company section in here. It shows a user as well as administrators access to all the software they have access to that they can install on their system. Shared calendar, a directory of all the users in the system, knowledge base, which is articles that we put in, self-help articles. Clients can customize this and add in their own knowledge base articles for users in their systems that they can access here through this portal. Messages is just an outside messaging. We can do broadcast messages to users. Clients can do that to all of their users. So that's the company area. The second area for users is support. This also ties into Office 365, so it pulls like Office 365 status. Users can come in here to report a problem, makes it real easy by category or what kind of problem that they're having. They can make a request to add, set up a new user, order a laptop, etc. Administrators have some things that they can do in here, such as requesting to set up a new user, scheduling an IT strategy review, many other things that can be requested from here. And then users can see and administrators can see a list of all the existing or outstanding support tickets that we have in place, drill down in, look at any information from there. And then the other area for both users and administrators is our university. So it's got a list of courses. We have training courses available to all of our users that we support on Office 365, Basics, Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the basics, as well as I think we have access to approximately 100 different applications that are available. Showing Office 365 updates. Guides are just quick guides that get people started on a particular application or piece of software. But just really quick things versus the longer training courses, something to just get somebody up and running. So those are the areas that end users have access to. But now here's the real gold is where administrators for our clients or just our main point of contact has access to a whole lot of other information, starting with all the domains that the company has registered, what the status of those domains is, expiration date on the registration of domains, every endpoint, and this is a full audit of endpoints. So if you're a company that needs ongoing audits of information and systems, this pulls every endpoint, stats, and the infrastructure within those endpoints, warranty status, etc. Same thing with servers. Also audit information on every piece of software that's installed within your environment. Again, all useful information for auditing and licensing. Usage is also pulling information from Office 365. So it'll show different adoption from Office 365 applications by user, how much storage space that they're using within the Office 365 instance, what sort of Office 365 licensing that you have in place. You can also store other licensing in here as well and keep track of it in here, but by default, it pulls out all of your Office 365 licensing. as well as all of your Office 365 users. And this is important as well, especially you want to audit this regularly. We find once we take over Office 365 environments that they haven't been audited properly, and we find a lot of new clients that have been for who knows how long, months, even years, paying for users in Office 365 that have been long gone. Security is another section, so managing backups, data breaches, which is going to alert you if your user credential or any of your users' credentials have been compromised and found basically in the dark web. Email security, as well as logins showing the activity and logins by all the users within your environment. Compliance, we can put in policies, whether it's compliance just within your own company or within your industry that you have to adhere to. This can all be customized. And there's reports, training compliance, which back up here with the university section for your users, you can map out required training, and you can come in here and see who has gone in and performed, done the training or completed training. There's an alerting feature, which basically just tracks changes in your environment, any users, any software added, etc. And then lastly, the account section here, which just shows any agreements that we have in place. Dashboards is a really useful one. We keep a lot of KPIs and metrics and dashboards for our clients. So this is all custom. These are just a handful of dashboards that we have in place for our clients, but clients can come here, look at their own metrics, KPIs, response times, things like that, all show within this dashboard screen. Invoices that we have outstanding, quotes that we have outstanding, etc. So, our portal is probably unique, and I think has quite a bit of certainly very useful information that you might not see in a lot of other clouds, but again, just kind of giving you a full demo of what our cloud experience would look like, both for a user as well as an administrator. So one other thing that I did want to show, I promised that I would show Office 365 for file storage. So I'm not actually going to log into Office 365. I think if you're an Office 365 user, once you log in, it just looks like a standard file structure, but just going to show you this is just Windows Explorer, but I just wanted to show how you can make it a little bit more seamless for your end users. So once you do a sync with OneDrive files and or SharePoint, it'll show up just like any other access to files would show up under Windows Explorer. So just another tree diagram, files and file folders underneath that people can store files, add folders. Security is managed within Office 365, just like you would any other on-premise instance of what's called Active Directory. So we can create security groups and user groups and control security on files that way. Endless, that would probably be a webinar unto itself, how you do all the back-end management of Office 365. But some people ask me specific questions about this, that once you do start using files within Office 365, is the user experience going to be that much different for users? And as you can see, you can make it very, very seamless. And there's many ways to do that. So just going to go back here, and we're now going to bring Noman Ahmed, our Director of Technology, back and open it up to any questions. This came up from Caroline. We're considering moving backup data to the cloud, have about 1 terabyte of data. What is your opinion on SharePoint? Well, certainly, I guess there's two things to consider here. If we're talking about just moving backup data to the cloud, there's lots of different backup options that you have that include a cloud component. So generally, backups have at least a cloud component to them. So that's generally covered, but if you're just talking about maybe moving files to SharePoint, certainly SharePoint has really grown in acceptance. We we have several clients that utilize SharePoint for file storage. It does have to be structured in the right way. You know, many moons ago, SharePoint was more so for set up to be really an intranet, and really from the ground up was never meant to be a file server, although you can use it as a file server. And a terabyte of data isn't out of the question. But I think you do want to just put a little bit of thought and structure to that. And hopefully that answers your question. If not, certainly, again, you can contact me offline. Okay, so with that, I guess we will end our webinar for today. Like I said, if you didn't get time to answer, put your question in or have something separate, contact me offline and look out for our next webinar. And hopefully everybody stays safe and healthy, and hope to speak to everybody soon. Take care now.